They say the ground never lies. Every step, every scuff, every bent blade of grass is part of a story most of us stopped reading centuries ago. But Native American trackers, they could read that story like an open book. While most modern people can't tell a deer print from a dog's paw, these ancient masters could tell you what someone ate, where they were going, and how they felt while walking, all from a single footprint. Imagine stepping outside and seeing a patch of dirt not as dirt, but as a living page of history. That's exactly how they saw the world. To them, the earth was full of clues, whispers left by wind, footprints pressed by hunters, trails carved by hooves. The difference between survival and starvation often depended on noticing what others ignored. Start with something simple: footprints. Fresh tracks have crisp, sharp edges. You can almost feel the weight that made them. But wait just a few hours and time begins its quiet work. Wind, sunlight, and gravity soften those edges, turning them smooth and dull. That's how a skilled tracker tells time without a clock. A clean, deep print? Maybe from this morning. Rounded, dry, half filled with dust? That's yesterday's news. But reading prints wasn't just about when, it was about why. How someone moved told entire stories. Deep toes meant someone was running, perhaps chasing or being chased. Even weight across the foot meant a slow, cautious walk, maybe stalking prey. If the heel dug deep, that person carried a heavy load or moved uphill. The Cherokee called it pressure speaking, because the ground quite literally spoke under weight. A tracker didn't just follow a path, they followed emotion, fear, exhaustion, relief. Then there's what the pros called story tracks. You've probably seen them but never noticed. A broken twig at hip height, someone carrying gear. Crushed grass still bright green underneath, they passed within the hour. A cluster of bent stems in one direction, that's the path they took. To untrained eyes it's just chaos, but to a true tracker, it's as detailed as a photograph. And here's where things get almost supernatural. Desert trackers could follow week-old trails across solid rock, not by footprints but by tiny signs. A single pebble flipped the wrong way, a faint smudge of oil from skin, the way dust settled unevenly on a rock surface. The Apache could follow a wounded bison for days this way, reading clues invisible to everyone else. It sounds like magic, but it's pure science. Pattern recognition trained through generations of survival. Every landscape tells a slightly different version of the same story. In snowy forests, prints become more dramatic, like ink on white parchment. The trick there? Temperature. Fresh snow squeaks underfoot. Older snow crunches. Even that sound told them how recently something passed through. In the desert, wind made tracking harder, so they focused on shade, following the direction of sand ripples to estimate where prints once lay. In wet plains, grass became their newspaper, bending and drying in predictable ways depending on how long ago someone stepped through. And if you ever lose the trail, that's where sign cutting comes in. Step back. Walk in a wide circle around the last visible track until you find where the trail picks up again. People and animals almost always follow natural corridors. Creek beds, valleys, ridgelines. Nature loves patterns and so did they. But tracking wasn't only for hunting. It was also defense. A single misplaced footprint near camp could mean a rival scout, a lost traveler, or something worse. Experienced trackers could tell the difference instantly. The depth, stride, and even pressure of each print could reveal if someone was tired, injured, or armed. One wrong judgment could mean disaster. So they watched everything. Even the smallest details mattered. Spider webs broken across trails meant something had passed recently. Spiders rebuild fast, so if the web's torn, the trail's fresh. Overturned rocks showed damp soil underneath, which lightened as it dried. Bent reeds near water told where animals came to drink. The land became an endless dialogue between people and nature. Here's what's crazy, you can still learn this today. Go outside after it rains. Walk through your backyard, then return a few hours later. The sharp edges will blur, puddles will shift, insects will leave trails across your own footprints. It's humbling to realize the ground remembers more about you than your phone's GPS ever could. Modern survivalists talk about gadgets, gear, and GPS. But Native Americans survived by noticing the invisible, the signs underfoot that told them everything. The secret wasn't superhuman senses, it was patience, observation, and respect for the land. Because when you pay attention, the earth tells you exactly what you need to know. And before we move on, quick question. If you suddenly found yourself lost in the wild tonight, do you think you could read the ground well enough to find your way back? Tell me where you're watching from. I bet the answer depends on your landscape. Because in the next part, we'll uncover the one thing even more vital than knowing where to go. Knowing how to find water when there's none in sight. You can go weeks without food, but without water, 3 days can turn you into dust. The difference between life and death in the wild isn't courage. It's knowing where to look when there's nothing to see. Native American tribes understood this better than anyone. They could walk through lands that looked bone dry to outsiders and still find enough water to keep entire families alive. The secret? They didn't search for water, they read the landscape the same way trackers read footprints. Water always leaves hints, even when it hides underground. The ground tells you where it sleeps. Start at dawn. When the sun is barely up and the grass sparkles with dew, that's when survival starts. Plains tribes knew how to turn morning dew into drinking water, not with fancy filters, just with clever thinking. They'd wrap soft leather or cloth around their ankles and calves, then walk through fields heavy with dew. After a few minutes, they'd wring the moisture into a container. It sounds impossible until you try it. You can gather half a cup in less than 15 minutes, enough to hydrate and buy more time. The trick is timing. Once the sun rises, the dew vanishes and the ground turns silent again. But what if you're in a desert where even dew refuses to show up? That's when the real magic begins. Apache and Hopi survivalists mastered this solar still, centuries before modern survival manuals copied the idea. Here's how it works. Dig a pit about 3 feet wide and 2 feet deep. Place a cup or container at the center. Cover the pit with plastic, bark, or animal hide, then place a small stone in the center so the cover dips slightly like a funnel. The sun does the rest. Heat pulls moisture from the soil. It condenses on the underside of your cover and drips right into the cup. It might take hours, but patience always pays off. Even deserts hold secrets if you wait long enough to listen. Nature gives away more clues than most people realize. Insects, for instance, are walking water detectors. Bees and flies rarely travel far from moisture, especially near sunset. Watch where they hover. They'll guide you toward hidden seeps, shaded pools, or underground springs. Mosquitoes are annoying, sure, but if you see a swarm dancing at dusk, you're near water whether you see it or not. The Apache scouts followed this rule religiously. When others saw emptiness, they saw maps. Then there are the plants, living compasses that point straight to hydration. Green vegetation in an otherwise brown landscape screams, water below. Willows, cottonwoods, cattails, these are your neon signs. Their roots drink deeply, often tapping into groundwater just a few feet beneath the surface. Dig near their bases and you'll hit damp soil or even a shallow seep. Desert tribes knew that digging near dry streambeds could uncover moist layers hidden beneath just an inch of dust. You can press that mud into cloth, squeeze it, and collect life-saving drops. Rain collection was another art form, perfected through generations. When the sky finally opened up, every drop mattered. Some tribes built bark troughs or used animal hides stretched into makeshift gutters. Others positioned large leaves to funnel rain into hollowed gourds or clay jars. Nothing went to waste. Every drop of rain was treated like gold, a currency of survival. But here's where ingenuity truly shines. Even plants themselves became water sources. Agave hearts, yucca stems, and barrel cactus pulp stored precious moisture inside. By chewing or squeezing the fibers, you could extract enough to wet your mouth and stave off dehydration. It's not a long-term solution, but sometimes it's the difference between seeing another sunrise and becoming a story someone else tracks later. And yet, the biggest mistake modern hikers make isn't running out of water. It's ignoring the signs. Bird behavior shifts near water. You'll hear more calls, more movement. Predators leave fresher tracks because animals congregate to drink. Ant trails often lead downhill to hidden puddles after storms. Even air temperature dips slightly near moisture-rich zones. The earth breathes cooler where it's hydrated. Want to see for yourself? Step outside next time after a summer rainstorm. Close your eyes and breathe. The scent of wet soil, that sweet, earthy aroma, that's called petrichor. It's nature's way of saying water was here. Learn to recognize that smell, and you'll start noticing where moisture lingers long after the surface dries. It's the same instinct ancient trackers trusted with their lives. And for all their skill, Native Americans never relied on just one method. They combined clues, animal paths, plant signals, insects, wind patterns, into one mental map of water. Finding it wasn't luck. It was literacy. They could read the land the same way we read road signs, except their roads were carved in sand, stone, and soil. Now think about this. In our hyper-connected world, most of us couldn't find clean water without Google Maps. Yet your ancestors could do it blindfolded with nothing but wind direction and plant color. It's not technology we're missing, it's attention. So here's my question for you. If I dropped you in the wilderness right now, no phone, no GPS, just you and the ground beneath your feet, How long before you'd find water? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments. Let's see who among us could have survived even one day alongside the old masters. Because in the next part, we'll talk about something even more important than water. How those same ancestors turned freezing nights into warm, safe havens without matches, blankets, or modern gear. You can survive weeks without food, days without water, but only hours without warmth. The cold doesn't care how brave you are. It doesn't care about strength or skill. It just waits for one mistake. Yet Native Americans thrived in winters that would freeze modern campers solid. Their secret wasn't luck or brute endurance. It was engineering built from sticks, bark, and wisdom passed down through centuries. Forget fancy sleeping bags and insulated tents. They had something far more effective: the debris bed. It sounds simple, a pile of dry leaves, grass, pine needles, and moss. But here's the genius: it wasn't just a pile. It was a precisely designed insulation system. You needed at least 8 to 12 inches of loose, dry material beneath you, then another layer on top. Why so thick? Because once you lie down, your body compresses half of it. And compressed insulation? Useless. It can't trap air, and air is the real secret to staying warm. Think about it. Air doesn't transfer heat well. That's why down jackets work. Tiny pockets of air trap warmth around you. Native people knew that instinctively, centuries before scientists gave it a name. So they gathered the driest materials they could find. Not damp leaves, not wet moss, dry. They searched beneath thick canopies, under fallen logs, or inside hollow trees where the rain couldn't reach. Pine needles and cedar bark were gold. Cattail fluff, that soft white material from marsh plants, worked like nature's down feathers, light and warm. The ground was the enemy. It stole heat faster than any cold wind. To fight it, they built layers like an engineer layering insulation panels. A thick base of dry grass kept their bodies above the cold earth. A top layer of debris sealed warmth in. They'd even add a few handfuls of dry moss inside clothing or moccasins. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Some tribes lined the insides of coats with shredded cedar bark, which trapped heat even when slightly damp, a natural thermal system that rivaled modern outdoor gear. But even the best bed can't save you if the wind cuts through your shelter. The tribes of the Pacific Northwest and Great Plains mastered wind management long before meteorologists. They built lean-tos with openings turned away from prevailing winds, using bark, reeds, or hide stretched over branch frames. The trick wasn't blocking wind entirely, it was creating a dead air pocket inside, a zone of calm where warmth gathered and stayed. A few inches of still air around your body could mean the difference between comfort and hypothermia. And when the temperature dropped below what even the best debris bed could handle, they turned to one of nature's most effective heaters: stones. Smooth river rocks, heated near a fire, absorbed massive amounts of heat. Once wrapped in bark or cloth, those stones were placed near sleeping bodies, slowly radiating warmth for hours. It was the world's first hot water bottle, except it never leaked. But there's a rule: never use rocks pulled from rivers or wet soil. Moisture inside them can explode when heated. Dry, dense stones were the only safe bet, and skilled firekeepers could tell just by touch which ones to use. Of course, insulation wasn't just for sleep. Survival meant staying warm on the move. Some tribes shredded bark into fibers and stuffed it into clothing, creating makeshift padding that trapped heat and wicked away moisture. In cold wetlands, they used cattail fluff inside leggings and moccasins. Soft, breathable, and astonishingly effective. Desert people flipped the rule. They dug shallow pits into sand warmed by the day's sun, sleeping inside to soak up the earth's stored heat. Same principle, opposite climate, always using nature's thermal memory. And here's the thing: heat wasn't only physical. Warmth was also communal. Families slept close, arranged in circles or tight rows, sharing body heat. Children were placed in the center, adults around them forming human insulation rings. It wasn't just comfort, it was strategy. Every degree of warmth mattered. Group warmth could raise air temperature inside a shelter by 10 or even 15 degrees. Add in the debris bed, a few heated stones, and proper wind blocking, and you could sleep comfortably through nights that would freeze a lone traveler solid. One of the most overlooked tricks was something you can try yourself: sleep position. Lie with your head slightly downhill. Sounds wrong, right? But it keeps blood flowing evenly, prevents numbness, and helps your body retain core temperature. Small adjustments, big results. These details separated survivors from statistics. Modern campers often make the same deadly mistake. They focus on the fire instead of the bed. Fire burns out. Beds don't. Native Americans didn't waste fuel trying to stay awake all night feeding flames. They built heat storage systems. Insulation was their currency, and nature provided it everywhere. Once you understand this, you realize warmth doesn't come from fire. It comes from knowledge. And you don't need wilderness to try it. Go camping once and build a debris bed just to test it. Or try stuffing your jacket with dry grass. If you're ever caught in a cold wind, you'll be shocked at how fast it works. Sometimes the oldest tricks outsmart every new gadget. So here's your challenge. If I dropped you into the wild tonight with no sleeping bag, could you build something warm enough to make it till morning? Let me know in the comments and where you're watching from. I'm curious if anyone's ever tried these ancient techniques firsthand. Because next, we're going to tackle the final frontier of survival: food. What happens when your stomach's empty, traps are failing, and winter's closing in? That's when the forest itself becomes your kitchen, and nature's forgotten recipes come to life again. You can track the wind. You can find water. You can even sleep through a blizzard in nothing but bark and leaves. But none of it matters if you can't eat. That's the part most modern survivalists forget. You don't fight the wilderness, you learn it. Native Americans didn't just survive off the land, they ate with it. Every season, every landscape had its own pantry if you knew where to look. And that knowledge meant the difference between hunger and abundance. Let's start underground. While today's hikers panic when their granola bars run out, ancient tribes were already digging for dinner. The prairie turnip, called timsala by the Lakota, looked like a wild carrot, but it packed enough starch and sweetness to fuel warriors for days. Women could spot the faintest hint of its leaves while riding horseback across miles of grassland. They'd twist them gently, pull up the root, and dry it in the sun. That simple act, gathering roots before the frost, kept entire communities fed through brutal winters. Raw, it tasted crisp and nutty. Dried, it became flour. Mixed with berries and fat, it turned into an early version of an energy bar that lasted for months. Then there were the acorns, something most people today think belongs only to squirrels. But to native Californians, acorns were life itself. Oak trees were their grain fields. The trick was removing tannins, those bitter, mouth-drying chemicals that make raw acorns nearly inedible. So they invented water leaching. Crushed acorn meal was rinsed again and again with clean water through sand or pine needles until the bitterness disappeared. What was left was a rich, nutty flour that could be cooked into bread, soup, or a kind of porridge. It wasn't glamorous, but it was nutritious, filling, and reliable. When harvests failed, acorns didn't. You could store them for years. No freezer. No preservatives. Just wisdom. Cattails, those tall plants with brown sausage-shaped tops, were another miracle food. Every part of them was edible at a different time of year. In spring, young shoots tasted like cucumbers. In summer, roots filled with starch could be roasted or boiled into something like potatoes. And the golden pollen from their tops? High in protein and perfect for thickening stews. Nothing went to waste. Cattails fed the body, lined sleeping mats, and provided insulation for clothes. If you ever find yourself near a marsh and think there's nothing to eat, think again. You're standing in nature's supermarket. But food wasn't just about eating. It was about balance. Native healers understood that plants carried medicine long before chemistry could explain why. A simple handful of willow bark soothed pain. That's aspirin, centuries before aspirin existed. Pine needles steeped in hot water fought off winter scurvy with massive doses of vitamin C. Sage smoke cleared bacteria from living spaces. Everything had a purpose. Survival wasn't random, it was systematic. Even hunting was done with precision, not chaos. Trackers used wind, scent, and silence as tools. They knew that a frightened animal wasted energy, which meant tougher meat. Calm prey meant better food. Nothing was taken wastefully. When a deer fell, every piece mattered. Meat for eating, hide for warmth, bones for tools. The tendons became thread. The fat, crucial for cooking and for pemmican, that legendary survival food. Now let's talk about pemmican. Think of it as the original power bar, high-calorie, long-lasting, and portable. The recipe? Equal parts dried meat, rendered fat, and ground berries. The berries added sugar and antioxidants, the fat provided slow-burning energy, and the meat offered protein. It could last years without spoiling. Northern tribes carried it through endless winters. Explorers later copied the formula and crossed continents with it. It wasn't just food, it was technology. But even in abundance, food meant nothing without awareness. The greatest survivalists weren't just gatherers, they were observers. They noticed when berries ripened earlier than usual, a sign of coming drought. When birds nested higher, a warning of heavy rains. The environment talked and they listened. Their calendars weren't carved in stone, they grew in the soil. And there's one more lesson modern people always forget. You can't separate food from respect. Before harvesting roots or plants, many tribes placed an offering, a pinch of cornmeal, a whispered thank you. It wasn't superstition. It was accountability. Take only what you need so it will still be there tomorrow. That mindset made sustainability not a trend, but a way of life. Compare that to us now, throwing away food that could feed families, draining resources faster than we can replace them. The people we call primitive understood balance better than any modern economy. They weren't living in nature, they were living as part of it. And if you ever doubt that their methods worked, just remember this. Their descendants are still here. Their foods still grow wild. Prairie turnip, acorn meal, keto, even pemmican, you can still make it today exactly the same way. The recipes survived because they worked. Try something for yourself. Next time you're out hiking, stop and look closely. What would you eat if you had to stay there overnight? Which plants look edible, which don't? Do you notice animal paths near berries or water? You're already reading the landscape, you just don't realize it yet. And before we wrap up this journey, I've got a question for you. If you had to live 1 week using only what nature provides, no stores, no phones, no help, do you think you'd make it? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know which landscapes still whisper their secrets to you. Because that's what this whole story's been about, not ancient myths but ancient knowledge. A survival code written in wind, stone, and soil, waiting for us to remember how to read it again.